What's the most psycho case of playing victim you've ever seen? One time my stepmom was yelling at me, and at that point I was no longer living with her or my dad, so I kinda just laughed and turned around to walk away. As I turned around, my shoulder nudged her, and I kid you not, this woman screams, "He's hitting me, he hit me." I was 16 at the time but was an athlete that left home to play hockey at a boarding school, so I didn't look like a 16-year-old. Now this is at a big family reunion, so everyone sees it and everyone, even the kids, start laughing at her. She had a reputation as crazy beforehand, but it was amusing to see other people ridicule her. I blew a girl's scam, so she claimed I sent her death threats that drove her to suicide. Then faked her suicide. Got people messaging me at 2 a.m. telling me to kill myself. Once the police did a wellness check, everyone said things like, "Oh, everyone makes mistakes." Not one apology by anyone who took her side. I looked into suing her for libel. One lawyer said whether or not I sent her death threats was a matter of opinion, and that it would be hard to prove damages. Damages are assumed when you falsely accuse someone of a felony. So I got a second opinion. He said retaliating for bringing attention to illegal activity was legally justified. So now I'm looking at small claims court. When I was a kid, I was at a friend's house and we were wrestling on the grass while our parents had a few drinks and watched. All of a sudden he grabbed his face and started rolling around screaming, then accused me of stabbing him in the eye with a rock. Same guy, a different time, we were playing tag or something in his yard. I got bored and wanted to go home, so I snuck out through the garage and locked the door that led to the backyard, then went home. An hour later my mum dragged me out the front because my friend's mum was pissed because she'd been working and he'd stood at the door banging on it and yelling until she went down and unlocked it. I refused to apologize because there was 2 other unlocked doors and 2 unlocked gates that he could have used, but chose to stand there banging and screaming so that I'd get in trouble. Probably my high school sweetheart ex, when she thought I was selfish for not wanting to get back with her after she cheated and left me for an older man with 2 kids a couple months after we finished school, who justified it because I carpooled with a mutual female friend to a work meeting. After the fling she had didn't work out. So, my wife's mother has always been super controlling and abusive. When we met, my now wife was 19, and her mother hated me because I encouraged her to make decisions for herself and not let herself be controlled. One of those questions she ended up asking was about what she truly believed, religiously. She was raised hardcore Christian, but after she moved away from her mother she ultimately ended up not being religious at all. When her mother found out, she was furious. She called screaming and crying and said, a direct quote, "You're oppressing me by not being Christian." I was close enough to hear the conversation at the time, and we were both dumbfounded for a whole 10 seconds, just trying to figure out what the hell she thought she was saying. I offered to buy my ex-roommate Chinese food because she was broke and I had $30 left from my paycheck. She threw a tantrum and then didn't speak to me for 3 days because I insulted her. I literally said, "Hey, I want to treat us to Chinese, do you want the shrimp?" Then told me I was so awful she considered kicking me out. All I asked was about Chinese food. Eventually I found out she was ashamed to admit that I earned more money than her. $30. Really? This 38-year-old hockey mom and I, F40 at the time, were friends suddenly, during my divorce from my husband. We were united in domestic abuse stories. I was done divorcing and she was starting the process. So pretty close friends, talking about intimate things normal people tend to hide. I heard all about her husband's abuse and I honestly hated the guy. Suddenly, our other mutual friend was discovered sleeping with my ex-husband. Problem was, she started sleeping with him before I left the marriage and moved out. Long story short, the only reason I had a sudden friend was because she was in cahoots with the adulteress and she was gaining intel on my plans. Honestly, about the worst thing for an abused woman is for someone else to tell him of the secret planning involved in escape. She honestly put my life in danger. I ended that friendship immediately. Several years down the road, my new boyfriend befriended that woman's ex-husband at the gym where I worked. He lived about 10 houses down from my boyfriend. Inevitably, I came into contact with the ex, a lot. We became friends. I heard his side of the story. Stories that matched up to nothing like she said. He had proved that all she was doing was manipulating me by playing victim so that I would open up to her. It worked. Later, she was guilty of stalking him, stalking others, putting sugar in his gas tank, the whole 9 yards. She wasn't a victim. She was a perp. I was in a crowded parking lot, driving around looking for a space. There was one car ahead of me. The car ahead of me stopped, so I stopped as well. I'm not sure why she stopped because there were no empty spaces and no one was pulling out, but whatever. Then, before I even had time to react, her reverse lights came on and she came flying backwards towards me. I didn't even have time to honk. She slammed into the front of my car, got out of her car, and started screaming that I hit her. When officers arrived, she was crying and shaking and complaining that her neck hurt, and cursing me for slamming into the back of her car. Thankfully, 2 people had been walking through the parking lot when this occurred and told the officer what really happened. Later, the driver of the car that hit me tried to tell her insurance company that I knew the witnesses and that's why they lied. I didn't know the witnesses, by the way. At any rate, if the witnesses hadn't stuck around to give statements, I'd have been screwed. I lived in my college town for many years before moving home, about 15 HRS away by car, because of the pandemic. I didn't formally move home at first, because none of us knew how long the pandemic would last, so I kept my apartment, grabbed my cats, and drove home. My best friend, who I had been thick as thieves with for years, who I even stood with her at her wedding as her mo, very fortunately, lived across the street. When I first left, she was kind enough to run over occasionally, run the water, grab the mail, etc. We had always done this for one another when we were out of town. After a couple months at home, it became clear my job was permanently shut down, and school was going to be remote. I agonized over whether or not I was going to formally move home. I loved my apartment, and my adopted town. Anyway, cost-wise, I realized I had to move home. I lost my job, I have expensive tuition, and I could live at home for free with my parents. I called my best friend, let's call her Sarah. We kept in contact while I was home, but like everyone, a few months into the pandemic, the quarantine blues hit and made it hard some days to even want to reach out to people. But we called probably every 2 weeks. I tried calling her to talk to her about the choice, a topic we hadn't discussed much. She didn't pick up. I tried texting, called again, and for a week I heard nothing. Eventually I texted her telling her that I was going to move home and saying that I'd really like to talk to her. Sarah basically responded that there was not point in us talking because I'd clearly made up my mind, which I had. I had no money to pay rent. She told me that she couldn't believe I was abandoning her. Keep in mind I was already a little heartbroken about the choice already. Anyway, Sarah told me that I was abandoning her, and I asked what the alternative was. I would be homeless if I went back, because my job was gone. She told me if I was homeless, then she would be too, somehow insisting that it was selfish of me to not want to be homeless. Better that me, her, and her husband all be homeless together? I let it cool off, hoping she would come around, and she never did. I tried a bunch more times to reach out, and every time she told me I was a selfish bitch, and didn't consider the way she felt about this decision. When I tried to give her her keys back, she sent her husband out. 10 years of friendship, gone. My wife's cousin married a girl and after a few months she said he was abusive, he's not, and divorced him and took half the money that he had saved to go to med school. Turns out she had done this to someone else before. She acts like this victim, gets a lot of money, and moves on to do it again, probably when she's out of money. Anyway, that cousin is now happily married to a wonderful person and they have 2 kids. Much better situation. My mom, she was in and out of my life growing up. Loves playing the victim, it's the only thing she knows how to do in life. She literally sobbed to me about how horrible of a mother she was, and how much it affects her to be reminded of her mistakes, but in a way that I was supposed to pat her on the back and say it's okay. More recently she's told me she forgives herself for practically abandoning me as a kid and so my feelings about it aren't her problem. Now she's mad at me because I won't allow her to ever know my child, and a good portion of my family feel bad for her because she doesn't get to be a grandma lol. You weren't a mother, why would I give you the privilege of being a grandmother thinking face haha. She's definitely also got some narcissistic traits and maybe a bit of a sociopath. My ex. Narcissistic personality disorder. Would lie about cheating, elaborately backing the lie, even years later. Gaslight just for entertainment and drama. I'm very hard to piss off, but she always found a way. I once showed her proof she was cheating and she did some word matrix moves around it, but it was pretty cut and dry cheating, insisted it was my fault, and she's the victim because I work a full-time job and don't have time for her. Sometimes she would admit, but quickly redact saying I coerced her into admitting fault. Would call her mom to join a fight we were having, insisting she's right about everything. Sometimes I'd get random number texts threatening me to take her side and let her do what she wants. Almost complained about cigarette smoke in the house to the condo board. She was cheating on me with a smoker, who she married. She admitted she did that on purpose, but was hardcore insisting it was a real problem, and gave me shit about it every day. would make us go on vacation after seeing others on social media, and needed to one-up it all. We barely had money. By we I mean me. She never worked. Oh, cherry on top, I had to call the police several times because she would kidnap me, unless I agreed to whatever terms she wanted, and if I tried leaving, she would stand in the door and start screaming bloody murder and abuse. As soon as the cops showed up, she was as aggressive as a kitten. The cops didn't buy her shit, and never charged me. I live in a state where if there's a domestic dispute, the guy is always at fault. Her sister generally hated me, until one night she slept over, I came home late, and my ex just jumped me out of nowhere. Cue her sister walking in and seeing my ex beat on me in front of her, having bought her sister's lies about me for years. OMG. I know of someone who pretends to have an epileptic fit anytime her mother/carer needs to take a break from caring for her. The mother/carer is allowed to do non-break things, such as grocery shopping, errands, but may not do anything the victim perceives as abandonment, such as visiting a friend, or taking me time. The victim has severe BPD and real epilepsy, but uses fake fits to prevent the mother from leaving. The mother can't ever be certain if it is a real or a fake seizure, so she is forced to call the ambulance and wait and see, even if she is 99% sure it is a manipulation. The victim also has her fake fits if she is losing an argument, needing attention, feeling low, etc. A lot of people self-diagnose BPD, in themselves and loved ones, but when you meet a true BPD you are struck with such a sense of holy fuck that is so obvious that you stop calling simply neurotic/anxiously attached/volatile people BPD. A girl on Twitter talking about how hard cheating is for the cheater. Yes, the cheater, not the person cheated on, because it hurts to cheat on someone you love. So basically she cheated and then played the victim. Dumb bitch, honestly. I upset my friend when I brought it to her attention that we hadn't spent any time together in quite a while and I missed her. She had been spending all her free time with her new boyfriend for months, which I understood, but I really hoped we could hang out again soon. This sent her into a very unexpected rage. She yelled at me for being so terrible, said her grandpa had recently died so she was dealing with a lot, and that I was an unforgivable asshole for bringing her favorite person, her grandpa, into it. I didn't. When I tried to understand where this was all coming from and what was going on, she told me that she had cut herself over and over because of this and that it was my fault. Then she ghosted me and blocked me on everything. To this day I still have no idea what the fuck even happened. Oh, and in the middle of it all, she also told me she was having to put down her childhood dog that day to make me feel even more terrible. Months later I looked her up on Instagram and saw her dog was still very much alive and perfectly fine, so yeah. My sister abused/neglected both of her children. Her boy was 1 and her girl was 7. She lost them both and proceeded to fake cry and post all over social media about her kids getting taken away and cried to all our family members and shit. And then she had the balls to ask me I thought she was a good mom. I told her no. She then proceeded to tell everybody that I said she was terrible mother and blah blah blah, and I just can't. I wish I wasn't related to her.